BYD is beating Nissan and Honda at their own game. From April to June, BYD sold more cars than these top three Japanese automakers, resulting in year-over-year growth of 40%. Meanwhile, legacy companies are struggling to even grow this year. BYD is now the 10th largest automaker on planet Earth, almost second to companies that have been in the industry for more than 100 years, after selling 980,000 cars in just the second quarter. And what's even more impressive is that a lot of demand for the BYD's cars came from overseas sales outside of China, tripling to 105,000 vehicles. These are really impressive numbers given just how much the competition in China is increasing and just how much slowdown we're seeing in adoption rates in Europe and the United States, where OEM values have plummeted in the used market and discounts are array at dealerships. And really the only way to understand this progress is by putting it into perspective with the biggest automaker on planet Earth, Toyota, which is expecting to sell 2.6 million vehicles in 2024. BYD, on the other hand, sold almost 1 million in just 3 months, albeit mostly from China. And as many experts will tell you, the automotive market roughly doubles in the end of the year than from the start of the year because of the holiday season, discounts, and significant amount of interest from buyers as they like to get new vehicles that are launching for the following year. Which means, with the current growth trajectory, BYD could outsell Toyota within 5 years. But how exactly is this company accomplishing this by raising its profit margins? Meanwhile, companies like Li Auto, NIO, or XPeng, some smaller startups in China in the EV space, are seeing their profits collapse by almost 52% year over year. Well, as it turns out, folks, the answer is technology more than it is product. The differentiation between these two terms is extremely important to understand. Product is what you make for the end customer. Technology is how you make that product and how the features are portrayed for users. What BYD as a company for the past 40 years has been working on is the development of technology from the ground up using semiconductors, microelectronics, power systems, and obviously battery cells. This strong foothold the company gained as a significant buyer of semiconductors has led to the company establishing a scale in production that nobody else can really match in a country that supports private economies significantly. Believe it or not, subsidies in China actually benefit the consumer much more than they do in the West. In the United States, any subsidies the government announces mostly lines the pockets of the wealthy CEOs and founders of those companies who were already multi-billionaires. However, in China, as clearly seen so far, a lot of these subsidies translate into benefits for the consumer. And a natural byproduct of these benefits is significant profits and scale for the companies that do the most. There are over 190 EV brands in China. Not internal combustion, just battery electric and plug-in hybrid cars. That is unfathomable, and you have to have a way to differentiate yourself. It's really hard to point to your product being superior when your competitors use the exact same silicon to power their infotainment and intelligent driving systems. And this is where BYD and many other Chinese EVs are starting to set themselves apart. Whereas Ford, Toyota, GM, and all these other traditional companies will still rely on NVIDIA and Qualcomm for supplying their chips, their electronics, and body control modules, Chinese companies like BYD are investing in designing their own chips, which is truly unheard of for an automaker. Nvidia, for example, reported a 37% increase year on year in its automotive segment revenue to $346 million, which, by the way, is insignificant to the total revenue the company gained of almost $50 billion. NIO, for example, in late July said that it's finished designing an automotive-grade chip called the NX90031 that uses highly advanced 5-nanometer production technology, one of the industry's cutting-edge production pieces. 3-nanometer, for example, is used in smartphones, personal computers, and AI applications, which is obviously something that requires low space, low power, high efficiency, and high reliability. But in the automotive space, anywhere under 10 nanometers is basically unheard of, which is exactly the technology pathway Chinese EVs are starting to take. Think about it this way. If batteries were the foundation for the first phase of electric car development, then semiconductors are the basis for the industry's second phase, as companies need to make their cars differentiated. And one of the only ways they can do that, logically speaking, is through features like self-driving, connected vehicles, and an extremely simple user experience. BYD's cash flow in the second quarter of 24 actually grew more to the downside, to negative $2.4 billion US. This on the paper for Wall Street and investors is a really bad thing. But for companies like BYD, this is irrelevant to what they're trying to accomplish, which is exactly the opposite of what the Western media and Wall Street typically expects. This is exactly why EV companies that went public in the United States have performed dismally poor since 2021, with most companies down 90+% and many having gone bankrupt. Especially some of these companies from China, like Li Auto, XPeng, and NIO, are performing decently well in their own respective manners, with XPeng, for example, growing revenue 60% year over year. But investors in the United States don't care about that at all. Right now, they just care about profits, and cash flow. But that's not the same methodology used by the folks in China. And I'd argue that that is a good thing. The media in the West is reporting BYD's negative cash flow to be a bad thing, without realizing the fact that that doesn't equate to profits. As you can see, operating income was $12.7 billion in the second quarter of 2024, and cash flow is when you have expenses like capital expenditure, investments, and financing also getting accounted into this. At a 19% gross margin and profit margins of 5%, which expanded to near all-time highs, the free cash flow margin is actually better than the previous quarter and is only higher on a numeric basis because of the growth in revenue. And so it's safe to say that capital expenditures and investments in technology has exactly what's made BYD successful over the past 20 years and is likely what's going to make it another key automotive player over the next 10 years. But as usual, folks, that is just my take on the situation, so let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and take care.